Welcome back to the King Film Sports Week 11 College Football Playoff Scenario Show, and we are going to be showing you every team that still has a chance to make the College Football Playoff here once again, and at the end of the video, I will show you my current bowl projections based on my College Football Playoff right now and based on what I think the committee will do on Tuesday. So without further ado, let's get started with Tier 1. We've got the same 5 teams as last week, all of them got out with a win. Ohio State was looking a little hairy there. Florida State was in a closer one than you would have thought with Pitt. Washington also in a close one with USC on the road, and Georgia in a close one with Missouri. All 4 of those teams win, and that's just been the story of the season so far. All of these really top tier teams just haven't gotten that extra loss unless they've played head-to-head. So that brings us to Tier 2, where we have a couple of notable losses from here. Louisville takes care of business, but as you can see, Missouri and Oklahoma are out. Again, I mentioned that Missouri close loss to Georgia, and of course Oklahoma lost their second straight in a Bedlam game that was Bedlam. So you might see those teams later in the more chaos-based segments, but for this tier, Texas controlled the game early against Kansas State, turned over the ball half a dozen times if you count turnovers on downs, and that blocked punt that K-State had to really set him up. K-State with an unwise, I would say. I did not agree with them going on the 4th down. Malik Murphy did not look great in that game, so I would have just taken it to the second overtime, assuming you could make that kick, which obviously tied the game at the end of the regulation despite the missed extra point earlier. Obviously, that missed extra point loomed large in the game. Texas escapes with their life there, but again, they have that lifeline over a Crimson Tide team that beat up on LSU at the end there. High-flying game. You didn't really think you'd be able to see that out of Bama. In fact, everyone was saying, oh, if this game goes over the total, LSU's going to win. Well, Bama proved them wrong. This offense has really adapted, and I was surprised by how much running the quarterbacks were doing in that game. Milroe looks to be getting to his peak, and good teams get better as the season goes on. See what happens with Bama there, and then Oregon taking care of business against Cal. Louisville, as I mentioned, took care of Virginia Tech to pave the way closer to that ACC potential championship game appearance against FSU. And actually, since Michigan and Ohio State will play each other, and then Louisville could beat Florida State, this actually gives them a better shot than Texas. And same thing with Oregon. One of the two of Michigan and Ohio State should be taken out, and then if they could take out Washington there and enact their vengeance, and then same thing with Alabama, if they can win out, take out Georgia, then all those teams should be in. Texas is the one that really needs something to happen there. So then Tier 3, a win out plus one thing to happen. So LSU was in this tier last time. They drop out completely. We won't even be seeing them in the next segment despite that great non-conference win against FSU. But Penn State, same thing as last week, get a dominant win over Maryland. They need to beat Michigan this week, win out obviously, and then they need Michigan to beat Ohio State to enact that 3-way tie. Otherwise, they could have Ohio State drop another game, which probably won't happen, and then also the Michigan game. So then it's the head-to-head, them against Michigan, and since if they win out, then they beat Michigan at home in Happy Valley, they would make the Big Ten championship. So that's what Penn State needs. I dropped Ole Miss below Penn State because now that LSU lost, they need 2 Alabama losses, and quite frankly, that's probably not going to happen. Bama does go on the road for their last 2 games at Kentucky and at Auburn, but if you were parlaying those 2 events, let's just say that's not a great outcome there. But then Ole Miss does have this game against Georgia this week. It's college game day, big game, massive game. If Ole Miss just wins out, then maybe they could be that one-loss team. Obviously they'd be competing with the Big Ten, and then you need obviously all of the contenders to, at least drop one game, but they'd have that win against Georgia. So obviously they'd tear Georgia out of that. Ohio State versus Michigan as a loser, and then Ole Miss actually beat LSU, who beat Florida State, so that's kind of a common opponent there. Wow, Ole Miss may have a path if they just win out, but it's going to be a really tough task for them to beat this Georgia team that's finding weapons all over the place. So now we move to Tier 4, and before I get to this, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Only about 10% of you guys are subscribed. We also have our weekly betting logs and NFL betting logs. So Tier 4, complete chaos, and I took a couple teams out. Obviously, Air Force got wrecked by Army in that game. And then a couple other contenders, USC, Miami, also dropped games to get to 3 losses, which I think is just going to be too much. No matter the amount of chaos, I'd say in the logical tier 4 would be Tennessee and Oregon State. Tennessee obviously needs Georgia to lose a game, maybe this Ole Miss game, and then win out, which would include a win over Georgia at home. I think they can, but they have a really hard game this week against Mizzou. Then you've got Oregon State, 2 losses as well, but they play Oregon and Washington still down the stretch, so they really control things. Both Oregon and Washington are great. Arizona just beat UCLA, so that loss doesn't look as bad. The one that continues to look worse and worse is Washington State. But that was on the road in a 3-point game. Washington State didn't really know they were bad yet. I don't know how much the committee will put into that, but I'd say Oregon State has a decent shot. Then Missouri is probably the last team on here that actually has a shot. They obviously have that out-of-conference win over K-State, which could loom large. K-State, the 2 losses in conference, but I think they are one of the best Big 12 teams. If they can get a little chaos to go their way, somehow find themselves in that Big 12 championship. Remember, the loss to Texas won't really hurt you that much. But if they can somehow win the Big 12 championship, which I think they could on a neutral field, quite frankly, that would help Missouri a lot. So Missouri would just have to win out, have K-State win the Big 12, have Georgia go undefeated, and then, just have to beat somehow the second SEC team. It would be really tough since they already lost to LSU, but it's definitely in the realm of possibility, assuming there's complete chaos in the other conferences. You're starting to get into the Big 12. Speaking of the Big 12, still have these 3 teams in the Big 12. Oklahoma obviously drops to this tier. There's still only 2 losses, beat Texas, but didn't really have any meat on the out-of-conference schedule there. Oklahoma State has been way better, and the committee will probably value that, but they just can't put them in the playoff after that 33-7 loss to South Alabama early. Unfortunately for them, they really have found a star in Ollie Gordon, though. And then Kansas gets the win over Iowa State on the road. But I just don't really see any of these teams making it here, barring a complete meltdown by every team in front of them. And then finally, Iowa. I just kind of keep them here as a meme, but they did get the win over Northwestern State as a 2-loss team. They can somehow dominate the rest of the teams. They continue to show their offensive ineptitude, but if they can somehow dominate the rest of the teams on their schedule, maybe they can garner some consideration or at least a New Year's Six bowl bid, because they would be making the Big Ten championship. Without further ado, let's get to my college football playoff and New Year's Six bowl predictions right now. So I have Ohio State at my 1 seed. The committee agreed with me on that, so I put them in the Sugar Bowl against 4-seed Washington. I have Washington at number 2 right now, but the committee seems to be valuing Georgia and Michigan more. Georgia should be the 2 seed, according to the committee this week after a good win over Mizzou. I still think Washington's resume is better than Georgia's, but the committee does not agree on that. And then Michigan is probably 3 here. I don't know. The committee just isn't valuing Washington. I could see Georgia, Washington this week, and then Michigan, Ohio State, but they won't let that happen. So I think that what we have here is a probably likely scenario. Maybe not of what we see on Tuesday, but what the actual bowls would be. I don't really know what happens if you have a conference rematch. They probably avoid that at all costs, and they always seem to. And try and get the TV ratings up on those semifinal games. So then the Orange Bowl actually has a contract. It's ACC versus SEC, and that's a pretty good matchup. FSU against Bama. I think Bama would win just because LSU already beat FSU, but we'll see what happens there. Then Fiesta Bowl, I'm just taking the ties from the Rose Bowl, putting it down to the Fiesta Bowl, so Oregon versus Penn State there, because you already have the 2 Big Ten teams in. And then Cotton Bowl, taking the old Sugar Bowl, 2 teams, and then putting them in there. Texas against Ole Miss, that would be a good game. I think Texas wins this game if they're completely healthy, but that could be a good game there. And then the Peach Bowl, I made it LSU against Tulane here. Tulane, once again, making the group of 5 spot, so that could be a good one there as well. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe and comment your predictions below.